We laugh. We cry. We learn. But really, what doesn't kill you makes you better at managing clients and everyone. I'm Morgan Friedman, and this is Client Horror Stories.
Hey everyone, welcome to the latest episode of Client Horror Stories. I'm very excited to have on with me tonight the one, the only, the awesome Andy Reinhold. How are you doing tonight, Andy?
Good. Thanks for having me, Morgan. I'm excited to be here.
We're about to jump in your story, but first, what is that alcohol you're drinking? It looks amazing.
Today is I'm finishing up this bottle of Monkey Shoulder. It's a nice little splendid malt scotch. I like it. It's easy to drink. It's good to mix with too. It's a really good introduction to scotch. And not too hard to get a hold of too. So that's my choice of drink tonight.
I love the fact that it's not just awesome, but you take into account that it's easy to get a hold of. Every once in a while, I'll have someone on the show and they'll be like, oh, this is a 100-year-old bottle of fancy something.
I can't do that. Like I was gonna pull up like a bottle of Macallan, like a $100 bottle of Macallan. So, let's not go all out tonight. I gotta perform a little bit.
You gotta perform.
Yeah.
Speaking of performance, let's go right into performance mode.
Sure.
And I'm all excited to hear your story. I have my water, or is it whiskey, in hand. Let's go.
Sounds good. Cool. Yeah, I was former consulting manager at a Big Four consulting company. I haven't been there for quite a few years now, so I'm okay telling this story. So I used to work in the technology areas of this Big Four consulting firm. And so my really big focus were these big technology transformation projects. So you've probably heard in like history books, mainframe computers. Well, there's actually still a lot of software companies and government entities still running software that ran off of these mainframe systems, even though they're not running on those huge, big rooms and big hardware that need to be, maintained with that kind of stuff. But the software that was coded into those mainframe systems are still around. And so back when I was, go ahead.
By the way, every once in a while I read an article, especially now with the whole Doge thing happening, about like trying to update the social security systems that run on like 80-year-old mainframe software.
And this is exactly the kind of thing I was working with. And this story is actually related to that exact social security system.
Ooh.
Yeah. So I worked on the state side. And so the federal government and state governments communicate a lot together. And so I was working on a big 2-year project that helped take on the state side that software that sat on the mainframe and modernize it into something that at least people could maintain it, that like the state weren't too afraid that their developers were going to retire within the next few years,
Oh, I just wanted to make sure I get the context. So so this is for the social security system, but there's like there's state by state systems in addition to the federal system.
Exactly. Yeah. So basically what happens is the state systems kind of, they set the rules, they determine who gets what, but then it's up to the actual states to administer some of the functions. Yeah. So there's like a partnership that happens between the federal and state systems. And, there's a lot of data that gets passed and forth between the two systems. And that's how they reconcile between each other. And so my job was I was managing this project, which took the old software and moved it to a new architecture, basically. Right. So I'm working with developers who are at the end of their careers. They're about to retire, and seriously, like every month we're celebrating someone's retirement. and every retirement, knowledge was just gone, dropping like flies, right? In the middle of our project. So that was a nightmare in itself. So this is a pretty complex project. I would call it. It was about a couple dozen. Not a couple. Let me say it this way.
Actually, before you get into the project,
Yeah.
I just had a thought I want to share. Because I'm always thinking about risks for client projects. What can go wrong? Client horror stories is kind of all about helping train people to identify client risks and what could go wrong. A risk that a client risk I've never thought about until this very second is the software you're dealing with becoming obsolete. Because I think I've done a lot of WordPress stuff, which is like a third of the internet is powered by WordPress. So I'm not that worried about it becoming obsolete. Yeah. But it's interesting that literally there are like 5 people that know this system and their average age is 72 years old.
Yes. It was very hard to hire for these roles to help us with these projects. And so our risk was get this done safely without losing all of our knowledge. And yeah, you're calling out a huge risk because knowledge was being lost every day pretty much. And it's a big concern. And these systems are very, very sophisticated. They run through a ton of rules. These rules are not just like simple rules because they've gone through many, many years of bureaucratic policy changes. So I'll just put it that way, right? So every new president, every new governor that comes in, every new party switch, the rules change. So these systems have been beaten to death with those rule changes.
And it's just not rules changing. It's like every time the rule changes, it will have to take into account all the legacy cases as well. Yeah, this is like near infinite complexity, maybe even too much for AI.
Yeah. I mean, AI would have a lot of trouble too, right? Like it would make a lot of assumptions and fill in the blanks, right? Definitely not a silver bullet for sure. And that's why these projects get so big and large and expensive. And sometimes that's why, because of the risk of moving off, it's not worth actually moving off. Sometimes those risks are so big. That's why these systems still exist, right? I from my understanding, a lot of credit card companies still use these mainframe systems. If you look up Unisys, they're one of the big subcontractors that still run these big mainframe systems. They just move all their hardware to the cloud.
P.S. I think I might need some alcohol, which is until you mentioned it this second, I never knew what Unisys did, but their headquarters is about 5 minutes from my parents' house and where I grew up. So like it's this huge gazillion-dollar company near my parents' house. So like everyone in the little town I grew up in on Long Island knows it, but like no one ever quite knew what they did.
It's covered. I mean, their biggest stuff is these mainframe systems. Well, I don't know if that's their biggest thing, but they are like these mainframe systems. They're Unisys mainframe systems. I
had no idea.
Yeah. So, and we would have Unisys contractors come and help us out once in a while and be subject matter experts. Yeah. Still big. They still exist. No, I'm sure they've probably, as a company, right? They probably branched out more. I just haven't paid attention to them. That's funny that you're so close to them. I used to live in Northern Virginia, and so that's a big government contracting place, and they have a huge skyscraper building there too, from what I remember passing. So lots of risks there. I mean, here's the thing too. We undersold the project. So even though this project was really expensive, it was in the millions. I'll at least say that much. The project was in the millions. The budget I was managing was about half of it. We had a big team. We had about I think 80 people to start off with. We grew to about, like 120, 150 people that were all hitting my budget that I was managing. And so many risks there that I'm glad you called it out, because now you're making me rethink how much risk we took on to do this project. Now, the goal of this project is when we flip the switch, no one knows. No one knew. That was our number one goal, because what we were doing was taking the existing technology and just moving it to a more modern system. Now, that involved a lot of manual stuff. Now, again, this was about a decade ago. So Gen AI and a lot of AI analysis tools were like, no one heard of Gen AI, first of all. And
it was a decade before it existed.
Exactly. And robotic processing to analyze this stuff was pretty new. And so I was actually part of a team that analyzed some of the most cutting edge software to like throw code into analysis software. And it wasn't great. And I still thought it would have been worth it to use. But ultimately, the government decided to say it was too much of a risk to try to use. Let's use human power to analyze our code. So that was the next big risk. We want to talk about risk. That was the next big thing. We use our human eyes to look through 1 million lines of code. And I will to this day always like wear that as a badge of honor that like that I led a team that analyzed 1 million lines of code. Wow. We actually like compiled that really quickly. I was like, I just want to see it. I wasted like a developer's like 4 hours to do that. Of course, he had tools to do it. It wasn't that he could count 4 million, but yeah, use our eyes, use our hands, and then diagram it out logically. Because with state governments, because some of the software was 20, 30 years old. Some of the software was built in the 80s, right? 1980s. Some of these rules, there was a lot of rules where it's like, okay, we don't need to do this thing anymore. We don't need to do this part, or this is just taking additional, it's just costing more time and more money because the computers are running this extra decision making that doesn't need to happen anymore. Because again, like I said, every new governor, every new president, more slot gets thrown into the machine.
I'm sure they're like coded in. Anyone born in this state after this state, but it's like the date was like 1911, and there's just like no more people who are still alive that would ever satisfy that sort of criteria.
There were definitely things like that. Like I for the sake of this day, I can't reveal what kind of things there are. But there were some weird things. And that was the thing. Like if we saw something weird, we're like, what does this even mean? We had no one to ask. Like we had no one because they had retired. Like usually what had happened was the person we needed to ask had just retired like the week before we needed to ask. And that's a great example of how this risk of us like losing people got magnified because we would need to use our developers to look through the code, and we had to like stagger the schedule. So like, of course, humans, we need to sleep and stuff, right? But people were retiring, and we just couldn't look at the code fast enough. So, oh man, just on paper, what we were facing, what we were up against was like tough enough. And I was naive enough to like say, oh yeah, I'm going to do this. I'm going to lead this project. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, that was rough. Yeah.
So the risks were piling on, people were retiring left and right, and dum.
Yep. Okay. So we spent about how long? Well, let's just say most of a year. It wasn't a full year, but it was most of a year. And we went ahead and converted much of this portion of the system. So actually, I probably should preface. So the transition to modernize the system is a process that happened over 10, 15 years. And in fact, when I asked my buddy of mine that was still there, they're still working on it. But yeah, so we finished the portion I was managing. And this was November. So we successfully analyzed all the code, reviewed all the code with all the staff of the government agency dealing with this code. And this code, I would also call out this code specifically for this part of the story, communicated with the federal SSI system, so Social Security Administration system, to verify who in this state is allowed to receive Social Security benefits and how much they're supposed to get in each of their checks. And so it dealt with that. It dealt with who and how much they're supposed to get with their checks. So we went ahead and we analyzed the code. We reviewed all the code, try to rip out all the junk, modernize the logic, make it a little bit easier to handle. And then we went live. And for about 3 weeks, we thought we did it. It was quiet. We were like, we did it. Because our main goal was, when we flip the switch, nobody knows. Nobody knows. Like, of course, we were talking to the Fed. I was having calls with them once a month. Like, here's what we're going to do. Here's our timeline. Here's what's going to change. And of course, we minimized as much change as possible. Of course, they knew that we're doing this. So they were keeping their eyes on this the whole time. We're communicating with them the whole time.
So you flip the switch and no one knows. So that's great news, because like,
it is exactly.
It's all super smooth. No one's complaining.
No one complained for 3 weeks. And we're like, yes, we did it. We did it, right? Like that weekend we flipped the switch. We contacted our contacts on the federal side. We're like, how are things? Do you notice anything different? They're like, yeah, we noticed your new files and nothing is happening differently on our side. So it's like, great, right? Like, of course, like every single sign was telling us everything was working. And then, so this was November. Several weeks go by and it's mid-December. And I get a call Saturday morning. And this whole time, my team and I are just like chilling out. We're just like celebrating the fact that like things worked really well. We worked really hard to get this project going. The holidays are coming up, right? Like some of my team was already off for the holidays, right? We knew this release was going to happen, so we gave extra people time off. And I just get an email, like ominous email about, hey, like it was my senior manager. Hey, I'm gonna go into the office. I'm like, wait, what's this? And I'm missing part of the thread for some reason. And then I get a phone call, and it's my senior manager, and he's telling me there's a big problem with the SSI system. And he goes, don't check the news. I'm like, no. What? And so I look.
So of course,
and of course I look. Yeah, of course I look. And I'm like, okay, what? I don't even know what to search for. I just look up the state, our company name, the SSI system, and then I find it. And it's a local newspaper article. And it reads that our company, it's like to the effect of, our company has ruined Christmas. And when I was like, what is this? And so when I read it, so I'm reading this whole thing about the articles explaining our company's relationship with the government. And then it gets into this little bit of talking to people in the state that have noticed that their social security checks have less money in them than they should have.
No.
Yeah. And it wasn't a significant amount. Well, okay, no, that's not fair for me to say. So people receiving social security benefits, you never know what their real situation is. While on paper to us, when you're looking statistically, it didn't seem like anything. It didn't look like an anomaly. But to these people, their real checks, their real dollars, it was a significant amount.
Oh, that's interesting. I just want to rephrase that because it's an interesting point worth diving into for a minute. Plus, we'll give you a chance to have some of that.
Yeah.
Whiskey. So I see. So even if someone's receiving $500 a month, and they like on a normal month, but for whatever reason we'll get to soon, they're now receiving 495 from your aggregate statistical average. That's like within the margin of error. So it's statistical noise. So it doesn't raise an eyebrow. But for individuals that, let's say, have zero money and
Yes.
they depend on the $500
Exactly.
a month. Like that $5 is like lunch for one day a month.
Exactly.
So they would rightfully flip out.
Absolutely. Yeah. And exactly. And that's exactly how I felt. Right. And that's why I took back, I had that little tongue in cheek moment, right? And I took it back. Like on paper, it didn't, like when we're looking at our monitoring our reports, we're like, this is just normal, like people coming in and out of the system.
Right.
But it didn't look like anything to us. But then, yeah, all of a sudden people are waiting, especially for the holidays, right? Christmas is coming up and people are trying to buy Christmas presents for their kids or their relatives, grandchildren, especially. A lot of these people are, they statistically have a lot of grandchildren. So yeah, the first like primary source like that I read on this local newspaper, it was a guy, and there was a video of him saying, "I can't afford presents for my family." And I'm like, oh my God, what happened here? Because literally we spent 3 weeks in ignorant bliss, thinking everything was fine.
In other words, what you're actually trying to tell me is you are the Grinch. And
exactly.
You, Andy, are the one that killed Christmas.
Exactly. For these people, we absolutely did. Like, that's how it felt like. The way the article made it sound like these people were pointing a finger at us. And that's how I felt. I felt absolutely horrible. But at the same time, I was like, what happened? Like, I had no idea what could have happened. So we all went in. Like, the entire team that worked on that portion of the system. I mean, my senior manager was there. The partners were all on call, all on deck. And we were there for 48 hours. Right. Thankfully, like some people on my team let me go sleep. A lot of us like took shifts and stuff. It took probably about a week. So within about 48 hours, we were able to like patch things up and like at least make sure people got the money that they needed to. So if I remember correctly, we were within a week, we got everyone the correct amounts that they needed to. But we still didn't know what was wrong. And that went week by week. So I said we spent that weekend there.
Those are the worst bugs.
Yeah. We couldn't find a root issue. And so basically we knew that every day this thing was running, it was creating more and more of these bad checks. Well, I call it bad checks, right. But like we're checks that were shortchanging people.
Yes.
And so all we could do was remedy it as they came up. So we had a solid way to do that. So we're like, okay, at the very least, no one is going to miss out on anything. All right. So how do we plug this hole? And so it wasn't until after Christmas where we found it. And so before, when I mentioned we were using our human eyes to review all this code. Now, my understanding, and I'm trying to make this simple because first of all, I'm like scared. 60, 70% sure of exactly what happened. I mean, like, because me as a manager, I'm not looking at the code myself. Right. Unfortunately, I know people have different opinions about that, but I'm trying to manage the entire team. It was a big team, so I couldn't look at the code myself. But from my understanding, well, what it was literal. Okay, I don't want to get too many people in trouble, but basically, it was instead of doing an greater than or equal to, we just did a greater than. So we missed out on equal to portion of this this logical operator. Like, that's how small this issue was. And that's why it was statistically so difficult to find, because it only grabbed a tiny portion of the population.
But by the way, for the non-software developers listening to this, I just want to spend 30 seconds to explain this and why it's incredible, which is software is basically just a list of rules. If this, then do that.
Yep.
And it's a very common in every type of software. If this number, if the date of birth is greater than this date, then do this thing. Things like that.
Yep.
So what you're saying is, at some point, there was something along the lines of
exactly
of if this date of birth is greater than this, then do this. When it should have been, if this date of birth is greater than or equal to this.
Exactly. It was just missing that equal sign, just that one thing. And so, yeah, that was it. And we figured it out. We plugged it, and everything was fine after that. And
by the
we
way,
saved Christmas, I guess.
I just want to make a little bit of a probably too personal comment, which is, when I was growing up, something that my mom would always say to me: "Hi, Mom. I'm very happy you're not watching this now, so I can say whatever I want." She would always complain about how picky and perfectionist I was with words, and there were many cases where she would say, "Make sure you're home, before this time," and then I got home at exactly the hour. And she's like, "You weren't home before. It was before or equal to like certain things." And my mom, when I was like a teenager, would always say, "You're just like a computer. Every little thing needs to be exactly perfect, or it completely breaks and doesn't work." So I get like trauma just reliving my mom's criticism from these this tiny little details not being right.
That's a funny story. Yeah. And oh man,
I need some alcohol.
Yeah, and with kids too, right? I have a 4-year-old right now, so it's like I say, "Hey, it's time to go to bed," and he's like, "Something is not right here." Like daylight savings, the sun is still up right now, or it's like, okay, or like the time is it's like too early, or like yesterday you let me sleep like 10 minutes later. I'm like, oh gosh, here we go. Exactly. Yeah.
By the way, my second kid, his name is Larry. He's also known as Larry the lawyer, for exactly 9 years old. For exactly these reasons, where he'll look for the to use softer language, he'll look for the exceptions to any rule you put forth.
Yeah, I know. Well, what makes me feel better about that is like I do a lot of reading up in like child therapy and stuff. So I mean, the fact that they argue against us and they lawyer up against us is a good sign that they feel comfortable. So I'm like such a pain in the ass, but I'm like, okay, let it happen. Let them argue back, because one day they'll be able to stand up for themselves. I guess that's what the child therapists say.
I have no idea what child therapists say. My approach, right or wrong, who knows, is I actually teach them to argue back. We've recently been teaching them debate, and to say, here's how you use it. Here's how you make the case against. Because I want to teach them to think logically. And to approach things as problems, and to deal with problems through reasoning through them.
Yeah, that's a very good point, right? Like, that's actually, I mean, you're talking about the trauma there. For me, like, I was never allowed to make my own decisions, which is how I ended up in a job like from the story I'm talking about. Like, no one in their right mind would have volunteered to lead a project like this. But I volunteered because I thought it was the right thing to do on paper, right, for my career. But I wasn't following anything I wanted to do. It wasn't my real own choice. It was like the back of my mind, the voices that my parents implanted in me, right?
But,
so, yeah.
By the way, on our fun parenting, alcohol-infused tangent, I actually think there is a client horror stories and how do you manage clients tie into this footnote of a point that we've been going on,
yes.
Which is, I often teach clients how to, and I teach the same with employees and bosses, actually everyone, that I teach them how to best convince me of anything and get me to change my mind, because I have this general instinct that things work better when the other side knows the way to convince you of things. Because how do you convince people of things? There are lots of different ways. Some people are better with logic, some people with humor, some people with storytelling, some people with numbers, and so on. And if you use like the wrong method to convince them, then you're just gonna have frustration. Why are you trying to convince me singing a song? I'm only convinced by spreadsheets. So you have to know, oh, he's a spreadsheet person, or he's a song and dance person. So I always clarify this with clients before anyone else. In other words, a theory I have of relationships, dating, marriage relationships, but also client management, employee relationships, is you have to know how to disagree in a healthy way. And I do that by, from day one, say, hey, here's how you can disagree with me in a very healthy way.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so critical, right? And it's in the line of work that you and I both do or used to do, right? Like the relationships is what's important, right? So, I mean, it's so key, because I can come up with a million different solutions that will be 10 times better than whatever we put in, right? But if it's not going to work for our client, it's not going to happen, right? And now I got to figure out what's going to work for them. And the only way I can do that is start building that relationship with them, see what makes them tick, right? And not only that, I do need to be a trusted partner too, right?
Yes.
So I do need to say, hey, you brought me in for a reason, or someone brought me in for a reason, right? So I do have to disagree with you to some extent, right? What is that extent? How can we make sure we come together here, right? And usually that comes in a form of, if I can be a trusted partner to you and I can find the right levers to pull, exactly what you just said, then I can come up with a solution that's going to work for you. But also, I'm going to use my expertise to come up with something that you probably wouldn't have come up with by yourself, right? And that's something that, to extrapolate from what you just said about teaching people day one how to argue back with you, like that's something I tried to instill with my teammates and people that I started managing, of like, hey, learn to be a trusted partner, right? You can't just say yes to everything. You have to listen. You have to understand how people tick. You have to understand how to push their buttons, and you have to understand, or what pushes their buttons, and you have to understand how to push their right buttons, right? Like it's this song and dance that we have to play. And so I actually have this blog article I wrote a long time ago, right? Like, and I just like said it. I was referencing like this dumb Michael Scott joke from The Office, right? And it's like, I was like, well, the quote is like, people will never go out of business, right? It's from like season 1, I think, or season 2. So it's like, I forgot what it was. It's like Michael Scott goes to Ryan's MBA class, like night class, and like the class berates Michael Scott, like that his paper company is failing. Like, how do you stay in business? You're gonna be bankrupt in like 2 years. Michael, instead of being, I mean, he's of course down, but instead of being really pissed at Ryan for like taking him to this classroom and making him like this little monkey in the circus show kind of thing, he tells Ryan, like, I believe in people. People never go out of business, right? Even if a company goes out of business, people never do. And it's like, I think about that, and I know I'm grasping straws a little bit. I'm extrapolating a little bit too far and getting maybe a little woo-woo, but like, yeah, it's all about people. And so even kind of going back to the crazy story about ruining Christmas, I think about like the things I remember actually most. So there's 2 things I remember most about that.
Okay.
Is one, like the good laughs that my teammates and I still had after we solved the problem. right? We're like, man, I can't believe we got through that. Like that was a nightmare, but we were able to laugh about it after. And two, and this is after I left, and after I kind of really reflected on like, what do I care about now in my career? What do I care about in my life? I used to I was really scared during that whole month that, we were in the news. People were pointing fingers at us. I really took it personally.
And interesting, and not just were you in the news, like you're just an employee of this company. So your boss, the boss's boss, like the CEO had to be flipping out over
Yes. It was bad. Like national partners were holding emergency calls. And here's the thing, these things still happen, right? So I think there was a article, I just forgot, like a few months ago, right? So our company runs state systems just like this story in several states here in the United States. So it's not like a one and done kind of thing. There's like about 6 or 7 states that this company still works with. So yeah, there's data breaches, there's issues like this that happen all the time, and this company gets in the news a lot, actually. And it just happens because we're dealing with people's well-being. We're dealing a lot of times with people who are in need, and a lot of times when these things happen, you called it out well, Morgan, earlier, right? It's a big deal for these people when these things become unpredictable for them, right? It's really important. So back then I took it really personal. But a big learning from that is I can only do as much as I could have. And I do feel like I was a little too hard on myself, and I made myself too anxious. So I put too much personally on myself, and I didn't know how to set that like personal boundary. Like, yes, I still wanted to make sure I did everything I could, right? To make sure we solved this problem for those people. I didn't need to be scared, right? And like,
Interesting.
I'm alive right now, and we're all alive. Well, I mean, I haven't heard that someone got hurt from that whole thing. Yeah.
So I have a good friend who's some like big, high paid, fancy consultant for like one of these big, fancy consulting firms, is like McKinsey or Bain. I forget which one, but one like that. And I remember he once told me that his firm, they hire a particular type of person where they target sort of like Ivy League smart go-getter types who have a chip on their shoulder that makes them take everything personally, so that they, as a result, like go over the top to overperform.
Yeah.
And I always remembered his observation, because until he said that, because I'm kind of the same way as you, basically. But him saying that and aging and some other life experiences made me realize, okay, so most people aren't like that, and don't take it personally. But not just that, these big companies with lots of money who are very sophisticated, understanding people, know that some people do, and they target that type of person to suck them in to these systems.
Yeah. The chip on the shoulder part I've heard, but what you called out there at the end, I did not realize until you just said it. And I was thinking back, and a lot of dots are connecting. And absolutely, I was like that kind of perfect mold. I did, and I still do have a bit of a chip on my shoulder. I have this massive need to prove myself, right? Like, why else am I like trying to run my own business and stuff?
But by the way, I just want to point out, I'm the one in tonight's conversation who is quoting trauma from my mother 40 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
That doesn't mean I have a chip on my shoulder on my childhood.
Yeah, for me though, like,
whiskey.
yeah, I'll match you there, right? Like, like I called out earlier, I'll just relate it back to what I said earlier. Like my parents didn't really teach me how to think, and you can extrapolate and just imagine all the ways they raised me just from that one statement, right? Like I was never allowed to talk back. I was never allowed to question. And so we can talk about, I don't know if we want to get in deeper in that, but yes, like when I had a candid conversation with one of my managers, I had discovered after I left Deloitte, I said Deloitte, but it's fine. It's not a big deal. So after I left the company, I started therapy. And I learned that I had anxiety disorder. And what happened was that I brought it up to one of my managers that I still kept in touch with. And I was like, yeah, I found out I had anxiety disorder this whole time. And they were like, yeah, I knew. I could tell. And then he goes, that's why you're so good. I'm like, oh, okay. Thanks. It was just like I try not to think about it too much. Like, I don't think he weaponized that against me, But absolutely, like the way they rate you and the way they review your performance, the metrics are very much based on that core thought that you just called out of like who's going to go out there and prove themselves and one up everyone else. And so before I left, they were introducing a new system to rate people, and literally what they would do. So if you heard in like in like a lot of East Asian countries in the high school system, and maybe even earlier than that, what they do is they like rank each kid, and they put it up on a board and all that kind of stuff, so all the kids can see how high they score on particular tests and stuff for everyone to see. Well, so this company incorporated something like that. And what happened was they just took everyone's like ratings. So what they would do is they would do like little incremental ratings throughout the year. And then they would put it on a graph. And you would be a dot on this scatter plot. And it would be like performance over, there are two like X and Y
right.
things they're checking. And for like 3 years in a row, I was the top most highest dot on that thing. And it was insane. I was like, I didn't know I could do that. And not only that, what was funny was oh gosh, it's so funny. You said chip on the shoulder. I got in, I had a 2.5 GPA graduating out of college from undergrad.
2.5?
2.5, yeah. And so when I first interviewed with them out of college, they wouldn't even give me an interview because my GPA was so low while they were doing campus recruiting. Well, I came back 2 years later and I was like, look at, I came back in, I got in to the company. And then 2 years later, I got promoted. And then a few years later, they implemented this crazy scatter plot system. And I was like, look at me now. I'm the top dot with my 2.5 GPA, college GPA. So yeah, chip on the shoulder, like big time. Like, and that stuff made me feel good. Behind me is a piece of paper where I print out that scatter plot.
Yeah.
When I left, before my last day, I just printed out all my performance reports and stuff. And I printed it out in case I wanted it. But yeah, before I started therapy, that stuff used to make me really feel good. All that external validation. Right. And so the systems are made to really, I don't know, promote might not be the best word, but yeah, it made me feel good. I was getting like every 2 months, I was getting like these random little bonuses because it was like, oh, you did a great job. And people were actually like, my partners would actually like call me out and be like, this guy deserves extra money. So I'll get like $500 here and there once in a while. I would always get some sort of raise, always get some sort of bonus. Like, and yeah, golden handcuffs like that's a real thing there. It took a lot to get me out of that. A lot.
So it sounds very healthy that you realized how emotionally damaging being in that system is, and you and you feed yourself. And
Yes.
and it also sounds like you needed years to now be able to look back on that
Mhm.
situation and even
Absolutely.
realize the situation you were in, because at the time this was just like an exciting challenge, and you need to do the best job
Yeah.
you can.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly how I looked at it. It was like, this is gonna be a great move for my career if I can make this happen. Right? It's another stepping stone to partnership. That's how I looked at it. That's why I took on the project.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting. So this is like there are few ways in which this story in this episode is unique, and everyone is unique in its their own different way. But one of the ways is this is something you only realize after the fact, that at the time was a horror story for the client, terrible
Yeah.
publicity for
Yeah.
them, and like this public disaster. But for you personally, at the time, you're like exciting little challenge, you're a young up and
Mhm.
coming stud. But years later, you're like, wow, this is the
Yeah.
exact sort of way that it sucks me into this miserable system.
Yep. Yep. For sure. And yeah, like I also that's a good way to put it. I do want to call out too, like if I went back, I think I would navigate it better now after I've had these lessons learned. Right. But when I was in my 20s, it was so hard to look at it from that perspective. Right. When you're so in the moment, when you're working 60-hour weeks constantly, and you just know you got to get that next milestone, it's just too hard to take a step back. And it
So
was for me. I know people that make it work, right? But it just didn't work for me. I would say my last conversation with a partner I really admired, that I wanted to be like, right before I left, I had a conversation with him. And I was like, I told him, I really wanted to make this work, but my body couldn't keep up. My body just couldn't keep up with it. And honestly, that's what happened. Physically, I could not work anymore. Yeah. So I had to stop it. Yeah.
wow, that is yeah, that is really powerful. I appreciate the changing perspective, and also that you're able to get out, see that perspective, and look back. Too many people I know
Mhm.
never just like keep on climbing up the ladder, and they
Yeah.
do that, and then they
Mhm.
die after a
Yeah.
few decades.
Yeah. 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 If the job stuck with my values, which is this is the barometer I use now. Now that I've gone through a ton of therapy and know myself a little bit better, I have to use systems and frameworks to help me make my decisions, both my macro and my micro decisions now, right? Because it's just not a muscle I'm used to flexing. So I had to use like the systematic way to be like, okay, I'm trying to make a decision here. What should I do? What are my tools? And so what I learned
Right.
is, okay, just set a values compass. And so I just stick with my values. And so it's like for me right now, and it changes over time, but for me it's freedom, self-care, and authenticity. Can I be it, do I have am I as long as I'm, making a choice and being close enough within those three, whether it's a big decision, a small decision, I use that framework to help
Wow.
me make my choices. There's this great book. I was actually on another podcast talking about this book called Designing Your Life by Bill Burnett and Dave Evans. I just sing praises of this book. It's called Designing Your Life. And one of the biggest things coming out of it is there's no such thing as the right choice, just good choosing. Right. So as long as I know I've chose based on my values, like even if things don't work out well, like as long as I chose based on my values, I'll be okay with the decision. Right. So
By the way, I have a couple of I've never heard of that book or that
yeah.
concept. Super interesting. It kind of
Yeah.
aligns with
Designing
like
your life.
my you really do like the book,
Yeah.
and I appreciate the old school paper. Um, so I've never heard of this book or this concept, but it very much aligns with how I see things. Like in my
Mhm.
companies and my work, I'm always about process, process, process. But
Yeah.
for the content, I'm neutral, and this is the same sort of thing. It's about defining how you choose, and then as long as you have a good process for choosing,
Yeah.
you will have a good outcome.
Yeah. Exactly.
Love what I'll also add is I like your phrase values compass. I'd never heard that phrase before.
Oh
I
yeah.
love it. And what's fascinating to me about your 3 values is that mine would be totally different. And it's a really good example of how there isn't a right or wrong, but different people are looking for different things.
Exactly.
And as an example, one of your 3 was authenticity. And I personally, this is just me, everyone is different, no good or no bad. So I always have my doubts about the value of authenticity, because in my experience, most people, far too many people, are just really, really lame, stupid, and annoying. And if they're authentic means be true to yourself. And for myself is, I just want to make lots of money and take advantage of people. Like, what kind of life is that? And do we want to encourage that as a society? Like we want authenticity, but only for good, kind, whatever, like people who are great. Otherwise, I don't want authenticity among assholes.
It's tricky, right? And that's the thing too. Gosh, I might be rattling off a bunch of books here. There's another book by, gosh, I keep forgetting the title of this book. It is called, let me grab it.
Oh yeah, that one.
Oh yeah, that one. Yeah, it's called. I hate the title of this book, but it's called "Reinventing Your Life" by Jeffrey Young and Janet Klosko. And okay, again, I hate the title, but I understand why they chose it, because sure, it makes sense for the book, and it is a little like attention grabbing. But Aaron Beck, the father of cognitive therapy, was actually their teacher. So they're like students of him. And so basically they identified these kinds of categories of what they call life traps, of like, these are the kind of typical things that people mentally fall into. And these are the behaviors that stem out of that. Yeah. And so what you called out, right, of like the kinds of people that are like in this, what I call this kind of autopilot mode of like trying to just make money and say F you to everyone else and just, I'm going to get what's mine. It's actually really interesting. You could actually trace it back to some of these life traps, and that some of that is actually just a front. It's like a trauma response to something that's happened in their past. And that was some of that for me too. When I was chasing this career ladder progression route, I was trying to compensate for one of my life traps, which was not being seen enough, like lack of acknowledgement, social exclusion, right? Like for me, the answer to dealing with these traumas was to gain success on paper. And so for me, when I say authenticity is one of my top values, it's actually an aspirational value for me. I don't know what my authentic self is, honestly. I'm just this book actually just told me I'm an absolute mental mess. Like I've hit, there's like 11 life traps or something, and I hit like 9 of the 11, something like that, when you go through the framework. But like authenticity is like, for me, until the day I die, like it's my goal to figure out who am I. And it's an aspirational thing rather than I know who I am and I'm trying to be who I want to be. Yeah.
As a classics minor, I love the Greek and Latin classic philosophies. And noti serotonin, Greek for know yourself, is like, it's the start of all ancient wisdom. So it's only beautiful that you're doing that. Socrates 101.
I had no idea.
Noti serotonin, know thyself. It was like Socrates, Plato's main character, go all around Athens, preaching that basically. And but a nice cue point to end our podcast on building on this authenticity. I think there's a way, I'm revising this in real time, but I think it's going to work. I think there's a way to reconcile both of our takes on authenticity.
Oh yeah, that's interesting.
Which is the following: when I was in high school, I liked the Robert Z. Zerig's book, if I remember correctly, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. And there, I might be too old. The book has probably been forgotten with time, but there's like a nerdy intellectual spiritual classic from when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And there's a line in the book that I always remember, paraphrased from decades of memory. So it may not be exactly this. It's something like, how do you write amazingly? Or question, how do you write amazingly? Answer, become perfect yourself, then just write naturally. And I actually think it's a really profound, the book has so many profound lines like that.
Yeah.
It's actually a profound point. How do you do something amazing? Well, just become a truly amazing person and just act naturally. And and whatever you do, it's going to be amazing. And I think this is the way we reconcile both of our takes on authenticity, which is how do you find yourself in this best, most possible, deepest way? Well, become an amazing person. Then once you're an amazing person, be your authentic self.
Yeah. That's an interesting way to think about it. I think I'm like processing.
I went in real time. It sounds smart and deep. So
I do see that a lot. Like the people I look up to the most, and I'm not talking about people in the zeitgeist. I'm talking about people that are close to me. I mean, I would not say they're perfect, but they are extraordinary in their own way. They're not typical. They're not people that follow, they're not people that just disappear into the mold, right? They're people that either have some sort of extravagance to their personality. They use certain mottos, they talk a certain way, or they have certain philosophies. They could be overly assertive. It doesn't matter. Or they can be incredibly held back, right? Doesn't matter. But there's something about them that they really, really take to the deep end. And if you think about it, they're like close to perfection in that kind of in that one like narrow depth of thing, right? So I don't know. I don't have too many concrete examples. Like there's this one mentor I had who's just he's incredibly high in like interpersonal skills, and he paired that with his technical knowledge, right? So like he just knows how to talk to people and build relationships and maintain relationships. And a lot of my client communication skills just came from him, just trying to learn from him. But he like mastered the art of that. And so I see him as interesting. And I've suggested to him several times, you should write a book, So yeah, absolutely. I agree with what you're calling out. It's definitely a really interesting way to look at it. Like become a perfect person yourself, or at least like take something that you can excel at, right? That comes, and I would actually add something that comes naturally to you, that you like, you enjoy, that gives you energy, right? It doesn't drain energy from you. It gives you energy. You can't stop talking about it, right? And become perfect.
I agree. The line, although it's about writing, it's meant to be a more general line about everything.
Absolutely.
You're married. How do you become the perfect husband? First become the perfect person. Then once you're the perfect person, act naturally.
Exactly.
And you'll be the perfect husband. It's the same point. And one of the powers of that is it's a fun yet deep way to flip Noti serotonin on its head, especially in a modern self-helpy sort of way, where it's like you want to achieve a goal. Well,
Mhm.
first improve yourself and become awesome, and then actually achieving your goal is gonna be super easy
Exactly.
because you're so friggin' awesome.
Yeah, 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 for sure. Yeah, and
And
for me, it's also like just enjoying the journey to get to that awesomeness state of awesome. Like I think there's something to be said there. If you're trying to become that awesome person and you're taking steps and you're getting energy by taking those steps, like you're on the right track.
I agree with that.
Yeah,
You have to find what you're naturally good at and naturally
yeah,
love doing and harness that, and then
yeah,
it will come easily.
yeah,
And
yeah.
and if you're fighting every step, that means you're on the wrong path, and
Exactly,
it's
exactly. Yeah, there's always gonna be a little bit of friction, at least a little bit of friction, right? No matter what, when we learn new skills, right? There's always gonna be mud to filter through. But yeah, it should at least like feel good, like most of the time, I think.
yes. I'd add a footnote to that, which is, in my experience,
Uh-huh.
there's a lot of friction and it doesn't feel good when you're in the early stages, but you always reach a
Yes.
point where it flips.
Mhm.
Like I
Yeah.
always, as a kid growing up, speaking of childhood trauma, although it wasn't traumatic for me, I
Mm.
was just obsessive about playing the piano. And
Mm.
it's this same sort of thing. I got really into it because I was always the good student and
Uh-huh.
did what my parents said. And like, I didn't complain.
Yeah.
I went along. I'm not a rebel by personality. And, but I did it because that's
Uh-huh.
just what you do, even though it wasn't
Uh-huh.
fun. But guess
Yeah.
what? After doing your scales
Yeah.
tens of thousands of times, I'm playing
Mm.
the same Chopin a million times, and you don't enjoy it. At a point,
Yeah.
you kind of get it, and you figure it out, and it becomes easy, and it becomes fun, and
Yes.
that's the point when the flip switches. So I think part of the trick
Exactly.
is to force yourself for that early stage and to keep going,
Mhm.
and what makes it hard is in that early stage, because the early stage is fun for no one. It's being able to
Yeah.
recognize,
Yeah.
is it not fun because you're on the wrong path and you need to change path, or is it not fun
Yeah.
because you're just
Mhm.
in the early stages and you
Yeah.
haven't
In the valley of
quite gotten.
suck. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
you haven't quite reached the point where it flips in your mind and starts being fun.
Exactly. Yeah. I so with my son, my 4-year-old, who gets frustrated a lot at this age, right? I always tell him practice makes it easy, right? And so it's like I'm just trying to drill that into his head where for me I was always taught practice makes it perfect. And like I grew up playing the piano as well, but I think that well, okay, maybe this is contradicting. So I was trying to illustrate and agree with your last point, but it might contradict your previous one. but
Please.
um but yeah, like there isn't really a real perfection, right? Like you're never ever going to play that one piece 100% perfectly, right? Because even even that, right? Like there's just no perfect iteration of it, right?
And
Um
I,
yeah.
I agree. And to tie this into managing difficult clients,
Mm-hmm.
one of my processes is, I think, and this is something I teach my teams, is every single client breakdown
Mm-hmm.
is the fault of both sides. There's a problem, it's
Mm-hmm.
both of your faults every single time. That does not mean the fault is evenly distributed 50-50. Like, it might be the fault is 99.9% his fault and 0.1% your fault, or maybe vice versa. But
Mm-hmm.
even if it's just 0.1% your fault, it's still 0.1% your fault. And
Mm-hmm.
because of that, you can always improve. Because when
Yes,
there's a client breakdown, even
exactly.
if it's 99.9% his fault, let's talk and think about the
Exactly.
0.1% that was under our control and how we can get better in that 0.1%. So next time that 0.1% won't happen.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, the practice makes it easy. You just keep going through it, you keep going through the motions, and then all of a sudden, like these big things that are big issues today are laughable things later on down the line, right? Because you've gone through it 1,000 times. Yeah.
1000%. And those are deep, powerful, and awesome words to end the podcast on. Our conversation tonight was quite all over the place, but there's like an elegant poetry to our conversation. It like wrapped back to some surprising themes of parents and parallels between parenting and working with difficult clients. So it's been,
kids are the most difficult clients.
Yeah, I agree, and the most important clients, and the only
they are absolutely
you never want to fire.
Yeah, exactly. You can't. Yeah, that the stakes are way too high.
You can fire everyone else in your life except the kids.
Exactly.
And with that, this has been a wonderful episode. Andy, it's been great hanging out, getting to know you, and everyone who's made it to the end, thank you for watching, and we hope you enjoyed it and learned as much as we did. Until next time, thank you.
Thank you.